problem. We can see it now.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for being at the presentation today. I'd like to today talk to you briefly about smart sustainable real estate. Smart sustainability has been a passion of mine for the last number of years because of the urgency of the situation worldwide, because of the global warming and all of the damages that human beings are doing to our environment by building our environment. So as well, I was very interested in the idea of sustainability in the environment, and that have led me to think about smartness in the built environment as well, because as we know, smartness and sustainability go together those days and cannot be separated. I'm also interested in real estate, so this has made me to think what are the best ways to think about our real estate development that would also enable us to create smarter and more sustainable communities around us. So today I'll be discussing with you how profit and sustainability can actually increase in the real estate market by applying the idea of air zoning. Okay, so I'll start with what smart sustainable urbanism means and what planning for mixed use is and why is it an integral part of smart sustainability. I'll talk about horizontal and vertical development and the idea of vertical urbanism. And then I'll indulge in air planning as a field as well, and how does it work and how does it relate to smart urbanism. I'll be talking about a particular case study in Bahrain Bay Area and 3 projects in Bahrain Bay Area, which we did that, the research that I'm going to talk about today. So we took those 3 buildings as a case study and we decoded that about air planning in Bahrain Bay Area being one of the most new areas in Bahrain. And I'll conclude with 4 remarks. So we'd like to think about smart sustainable urbanism. Smart sustainability is really thinking about cities as a holistic system of systems. So cities are very complex in their nature, and they come as a complex combination of different systems that needs to be working together in a particular way. Smart sustainability is when the system of systems work as a strategic approach to achieve long-term goals for urban sustainability, with, of course, the support of technological advances so that we can implement all ideas of smartness into that. Now, we also like to think of the city of more than the human aspects of it. So not only humans live in cities, but other creatures as well. We have plants and we have animals who should be also an integral part of our cities. So smart sustainable urbanism has been redefined as a concept as an urban locality functioning as a healthy system of systems, not just a system of systems, with sustainable balanced practice of economical, social, environmental, and governance activities, generating desired outcomes and futures for all humans and non-humans as well. So if we see around the literature, we'll see that a lot of data have emerged recently that talk about sustainable cities and smart sustainable cities and the linkage between these two. So we have different books, different journals. One of the latest journals in that field is the Smart and Sustainable Built Environment Journal, which publishes research that is most up to date about the topic. Now, land use is a concept that first emerged more than 10,000 years ago. It is the idea of dividing land uses and different arrangements and activities and inputs that we can undertake in a certain land type. So we decided to say, well, this land is dedicated for educational purposes, this land is dedicated for residential purposes, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the idea of land use. So there's a piece of land, we decide to divide the piece of land, decide where to put the houses, where do we put the parks, and where do we put the other supporting facilities like schools, hospitals, and so on. Now, vertical urbanism is when you take that piece of land and you think about it from a vertical axis instead of the only horizontal axis. Urban density is an indicator of sustainability, that is for sure. Now, this is something that we are now debating because of the COVID and social distancing regulations that we all have to obey to. And this linkage between density and sustainability is now being discussed more than ever. Now, the urban density is important because of its contribution to energy saving and reducing the need for travel. When we're doing vertical planning, we mean by a piece of land, and then we have residential units or commercial units or mixed-use units that are built vertically rather than horizontally. So if we put that in a vertical sense, we have plot 1, plot 2, and plot 3. Now, the idea of air planning is doing land use, but on the vertical axis, in the sense that we will decide that retail, for instance, would go on the lower floors of these two plots. This is, of course, before those buildings are developed. And then offices should go on these floors of these plots. And health should also be in the center in plot 2 to be able to serve plot 1 and plot 3. A school should be available in plot 3 because that's the maximum distance that a child in primary school can walk from plot 1 to plot 3, and then residential in those areas of those plots. So by doing that, we have a holistic neighborhood, vertical neighborhood, if we might say, or sometimes even vertical city, depending on how high those skyscrapers go. This is not a new idea. It has been there for ages. If we look at this image here of London in the year 2500, this image or illustration was imagined in the year 1920 in an advertisement. And you can see that already this complex system of systems has been already in the ideas of designers, of architects, of city planners since a very long time ago. Then if you look at those images here, from also the early 20th century, 1920s, to the mid 20th century, 1950. And you can see how they've imagined that we have complexity at a vertical axis, to the extent that they also thought about transportation and how can transportation also be integrated into this vertical axis that would densify our cities as much as possible and make everything within a walking distance. Now, we've chosen Bahrain Bay for the study, and we started the study by looking at the daily average commute in Bahrain. Now, the daily average commute in Bahrain is 63 minutes by the research, from the results of the research that we have done. 38 minutes is the average daily commute to and from school or work. 21 minutes is the average daily commute to the gym, just because we have more gyms in Bahrain now as well. And 30 minutes is the daily commute in Hong Kong, for instance, if we compare Bahrain to other cities. So that is really a lot in terms of commuting time for Bahrain in a very small island to be spending 63 minutes daily to commute from one space to the other. So we're taking Bahrain Bay as an example. And we started to look at how can we apply those ideas of air zoning in such a new development. 90 minutes is the average daily commute time in Tokyo. So we're kind of in the middle of this international scheme. We're not really doing very much bad as Tokyo, but we're also not as good as Hong Kong in that sense. So the patterns, of course, will all depend on our travel by car. Rarely do people travel by bicycle or by walking for really daily purposes like going to work or going to the gym. We do that for exercise, but not really to get to work or to the gym or to buy our groceries and so on. So how mixed use is Bahrain Bay? Now, we all know Bahrain Bay area, it has some residential towers, some commercial towers, we have corporate buildings, we have institutional buildings like the IBF and so on. But how much of a mixed use is it? We've noticed through the study that most of those buildings are not really mixed use. They're plots that are mixed use, but we're not really thinking about the vertical axis. Each plot is being thought of separately, which could be also very dangerous if we think about it. We've selected 3 projects. There are 3 residential projects because we wanted to talk about when a person lives at one place, how much of an easy access does that person have to necessary facilities like a pharmacy, like a bakery, like a clinic or something like that. So we've studied Golden Gate, Onyx Bahrain Bay, which I think now have changed name, and Water Bay. And we did a comparison between, if you notice the services, which is I don't know if you see what I'm pointing, but it is this wide row here. So the services that are in all of these projects, every one of these projects has a cinema. Every one of these projects has a gym, swimming pool, cafe, maybe a large lounge, and so on. But they're not really complementing each other. We're repeating those facilities in each of those projects. But do really the people who are living in Golden Gate, are they going to benefit anything from anything that from the other projects, and how much are they benefiting from that? Are we really maximizing our potential in terms of mixed use in Bahrain Bay? So we've taken away a few things from projects like this and looking into the ideas of air zoning and case studies in Bahrain. There's very much overlap in the facilities provided, and that could benefit the developer at the time of the sale because of the competitive advantages of having this component or that component in a building. But on the long run, it is very destructive to the sustainability overall, and it's not really talking about our smartness and our zoning in Bahrain. So long-term economic growth of the area is also jeopardized, and the health of the inhabitants. Now, throughout the research, developers were not really in favor of air use planning because of the fear that if it is enforced, it would really lessen their control over the plots that they buy and the freedom of choice. And from a governmental perspective, also the government could be worried that investors would not want to invest with so many constraints. Now, air use planning could help developers protect their property values on the long run while also maintaining sustainability by keeping unsuitable uses out of the area, ensuring that their tenants have quick, easy access to various vital facilities. Now, while the developers are against this idea, if we really show them the bigger picture and the master plan, saying that you can also advertise that people who are going to invest in this building of yours or buy apartments or be tenants in your building will also have very close access to a primary school, to a healthcare facility, to a bakery, and to a pharmacy, all in that location within walking distance. Through air zoning, developers will ensure that the development next door will not have exact same facilities, which could also give them a competitive advantage in that sense. But competition could arise in other things like, for example, the building facade. Now, as a conclusion, skyscrapers and vertical development that houses large numbers of populations in what we know today as vertical cities exist in Bahrain as well. The study suggests that uses must be controlled not only at the horizontal axis, but also at the vertical axis. And we could also use advanced technologies to ensure that we can do the air zoning properly. Now, to be able to decode an area like Bahrain Bay and be able to zone it vertically and horizontally, for sure you will need certain programs to do that, and we will need a rich database of information. The current urban system in Bahrain, like many other countries in the world, does not really adopt sustainable mixed-use principles, which it should, and overlap in some uses and lacks of others, which is just in that area and others in Bahrain that better coordination efforts can be made. Now, much of the criticism to air zoning come from the fear of the added restriction that could violate individual property rights. But the designs of tall buildings in downtown areas around the world are mainly controlled by the building developers and architects, which is not a healthy practice as well. Very little control really is enforced on the uses of facilities within the plot. No one tells the developer what to include and what to include. And therefore, there are no really neighborhood communications in that sense. This results in repetitive facilities that are underutilized. If we go to any of those projects and see how much are those different cinemas and cafes are utilized, we will find that this is a very low percentage. And there is a lack of other critical facilities at the same time. So I'd like to wrap up by this quote here, which brings us back to our idea of smart sustainable urbanism, that it is not just the human aspect, but also the other aspects which I have not talked about in this presentation, but they always need to be in the picture. A smart city is a city where humans, trees, birds, and other animals can grow with all their glories, imperfections, freedom, and creativity. They are not just cities of technology, but cities of love, life, beauty, dignity, and equality. And this is how we should be thinking about our cities. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation. I'd like to leave you with the slide if you'd like to capture it. This has my information, and feel free to contact me anytime. Thank you very much.
Shukran, Dictora. Thank you very much for this informative and interesting presentation. Thank you. For next presentation, let me introduce Dr. Bijan Majidi, who is a board member at Bahrain Smart City Society. He is the founder and CEO of Dynamica International, a management consultancy company based in the Kingdom of Bahrain, focused on business innovation, digital transformation, project management, new ventures, and knowledge development. Dr. Bijan holds a bachelor's degree in engineering and nautical science from the Naval Academy in Italy, MBA in the UK, doctorate in electronics engineering from the University of Genova, Italy. So let me share, please, the slides. You may start, Dr. please.
Thank you, Sayyid Hassan. Thank you, everybody that has joined us, and thank you for the opportunity. So I will be talking basically about the 3x3 paradigm, and this is all about the smart city being an inclusive organization. So what are these 3x3? The first three is it's all about planning. It's about execution of the plan. And then once you have developed something, it's all about managing and maintaining whatever you have developed. And you will see during my presentation, that last 15 minutes, that I will be talking about different domains. Now, these 3 points and the relevance in it and maintaining a smart city. Now, a smart city has different domains, and I have identified the key domains of any smart city in any part of the world with focus on the individual, on the citizen, on the person. And then each domain has key components, and each component has key stakeholders. And we see all these 3x3, how they interact and how important it is to actually develop a smart city rather than a bunch of declaration of intents or marketing hyped up buzzwords that at the end of the day, it doesn't take us anything. And instead of making a smart city, we are making a confused city that costs a hell of a money and is manageable by nobody. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So we can skip this. Just my focus is business and organizations, reorganization, restructuring, and transformation. Who we are, Mr. Hassan very clearly explained it to us. We are basically volunteers trying to bring our knowledge and apply it to the development at any level where our knowledge applies to for the development of a smart city in the Kingdom of Bahrain. Next, please. So first and foremost, a smart city is a big puzzle. Its domains multiplied by its components, and each component by its stakeholders. And now let's see what I mean by that. Next, please. The domains, as an individual, my first concern is about my health. So if I'm living in a smart city, I know that I have a smart health system at my disposal. My second concern is education. The third concern is utilities, electricity, water, gas, and you name it. I put telecommunication out of the utilities because telecommunication space plays a huge role, not only from the consumer and citizen standpoint, but also from it's a glue to all the things that are happening in a smart city. Then we need a house, and we need an office, and then we need to move around, that's mobility, and then we need the government to enable us to pay our taxes, our fees, our tickets, and whatever we have to pay. And last but not least, the smart city is a place where everything can end up in a recycling and in intelligent waste management. Next, please. So these are the key domains. Now, each of these domains has key components. To develop it, you have to define the standards, regulations, and all the way down to rules and qanun, legislation. Then who is in charge of developing these things? Take any of the domain, take healthcare. Okay, healthcare has standards, regulations, legislation. People are in charge of it. There is an infrastructure and technology. There is an aspect of environmental and pollution matters that are applied to that particular domain. And then obviously a smart city in each domain, it doesn't come out of thin air. You have to have money to do it. And you don't just throw money at things. You don't throw money at technology. You don't throw money at people just because they have a good idea, but you have to run it as a business and have a return on your investment, no matter if the money comes from gas, from oil, or from sweat businesses. And then you have to have a proper finance manager. Who are the stakeholders of the smart city of each domain? Customers, legislators, developers, administrators, and investors. These are the key components, these are the key stakeholders in a smart city. Next, please. Next slide, please.
Coming back.
Okay, inshallah.
Something happened. Yep.
Okay, Said Hassan, you're back.
Not hearing. The controller is gone.
No problem. Here we go. Now, what are the...
Sorry for that, I lost connection. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Can
Sorry
you
for
put
that.
that in presentation mode, please?
All right.
Now, all right. Yeah. After this next one, yeah. So, no. The previous one, please. The previous one, yeah. So, I have put the entire 3x3 puzzle in one slide, and I've called it the infrastructure stack. You see, there is an enabling authority. If there is no vision with clear-cut objectives, plans, long-term, medium, and short-term, and coordination. You know, a smart city at the end of the day starts from the government, because the budget comes from there. It doesn't matter if it's a PPP project, but the planning, the coordination has to come from the top of the government. And government is run by ministries. So ministries have to coordinate, they act together. And we know that doesn't happen really anywhere in the world. Ministries are not really coordinating properly. Even in the boundaries of the same ministry, sometimes activities are not coordinated properly. So this has to be improved dramatically if you want to have a consistent smart city. Budgets have to be aligned, standards have to be aligned, regulation, all the way to legislation. Now, the enabling infrastructure, previous, yes. Previous, please. The enabling infrastructure, previous, please, of a smart city is like a cake. The health infrastructure and the education infrastructure have common denominators. For example, telecom. If tomorrow we have 5G, 5G is benefiting every infrastructure on any domain. Housing and buildings infrastructure. If tomorrow we have renewable energy and we have the rules and regulations and standards for solar energy at office, home, and public spaces, well, the infrastructure has to be regulated. What's the free, what's per kilowatt hour, and so on and so forth. The mobility infrastructure, urban, extra, the public, commercial, and private transportation, all these things, the lighting, the sidewalks, the roads, the parking, the bridges, all the way to now what we call CASE, connected, autonomous, shared, and electric vehicles. These are all components of an infrastructure. The infrastructure means hardware and basic software. We have not put the application, and people who are in the world and understand information technology know that hardware and operating system without the application is worthless. You can do all these things and still do not have the end result. So you can spend billions and still not knowing what you're exactly doing, because this is called infrastructure. All the way down to utilities, recycling, and government service. Bahrain has been very active in e-government services. We know that we can do a lot of things electronically in Bahrain. I can guarantee you, I'm now 3 months in Europe, and many things that for me was just a piece of cake in Bahrain. Here in Europe is a nightmare. So Europe is way behind in terms of e-government activities. Next slide. So success factors. It starts from leadership. There must be a master plan. A smart city doesn't come as a patchwork of one experiment to the right, one to the left, and all of a sudden, oh, by miracle, we have a smart city. No, it doesn't happen. Look at Dubai. Dubai is not a smart city. It's a complex city, but you still sit for hours in traffic. You still sit, and that is not what you expect from a smart city. You expect to have an easy life. Now, Dubai has a lot of positive things, but in terms of traffic, as an example. So leadership, vision, plan. You have to have a long-term plan divided into blocks. How do you eat an elephant? You eat the elephant by bites, by small bites. You start from the tail and slowly, slowly you eat it. You cannot eat the elephant altogether. Coordination, very important, but you have to coordinate through a coordination office. See, what is the most important element of an airport? The control tower. Without a control tower, you cannot have an airport. Without the infrastructure and the regulations and the legislation, you cannot have an airport. So very important to have, it's not enough to say, I have a master plan, I have a national plan, but I don't have a coordination center. And then you have to decide selected key projects that are relevant to the most important ministries. So they all work on the same direction. Not that one goes on how to save CO2 and one how to eliminate CO2 and one how to enhance CO2. So the key projects have to, by the way, solve real problems or opportunities. Then technology comes in. Many people, many countries think that smart city means only throw technology at a problem, at a process. If the process is wrong, you can throw technology at it, but it will not solve your problem. It will complicate your problem. You spend a lot of money, but first you have to have the common thinking, simplify the process, and then through the just-in-time technology means not too early, not too late. So bring policies and technology just in time. And then obviously, you cannot do everything by yourself. You have to attract the know-how or develop the know-how and investment. And we heard Said Hassan saying it is very important to have the PPP. Next slide, last slide. So this is how a coordination office, the control tower of the smart city could work. It interacts with a number of entities, universities, standardization units, industry and corporations, private entities, government, ministries, and regulatory authorities, and then the specialists with the know-how. They are very important, but they should not drive the process. They drive the components. They give you the building blocks. And each of them have a role. But the coordination, master planning, and the authority is in the center. This is not a democratic process. This is controlled, organized, budgeted, and managed development and maintenance and management process. Next slide, please. All this will bring us to an inclusive smart city. You cannot have a smart city that e-government is fancy, but healthcare is terrible, or you have no mobility, no public transportation, and public transportation is still like 150 years ago, because 100 years ago was very good. 100 years ago, everything was electric. So smart living, smart planning and development, smart administration and management, smart investments and financial returns. These simplify the life of the key stakeholders of a smart city, from the private citizen all the way to the government key authorities. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bijan, for this excellent presentation. Thank you. I think if anybody has any question, we can address that. So feel free. Anybody has any kind of clarification or questions, please.
So Dr. Fay and I were very good. No questions.
Right, no questions?
Mr. Hassan, just I have one question, please. First of all, I'd like to thank very much, in fact, Dr. Fay and Dr. Bijan for their excellent presentation. And this is the first time we can see such nice topic which will touch exactly the country and the living and the core of our work and the core of the function of our societies of Bahrain. I'd like to pass a question to Dr. Fay that the study which has been made in Bahrain Bay, which really touch something new in the country and focus on the smart living and the smart environment and all this important aspect. Has it been discussed or passed with the authorities so they can consider this element? Because you talk about something quite important, actually, a futuristic value even. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Now, we as researchers at the university generally, we do very bad at communicating our ideas to the government or to any other entity in that sense. But now research has been published, of course. It's published in an international journal and it has open access to everyone who wants to read it online. So that's for a starter. Now, as part of the interviews that we did, there were participants from governmental entities, which we shared the research with them after we have done the research. But we haven't really taken it to a higher level, just also because that this is a first stage in a longitudinal study, which at the end of it should inshallah be shared with perhaps with executive management of the government.
We're hoping that. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
So I can see also questions in the chat box. So please feel free if you have any question to share it in the chat box. So Mr. Fawzi is saying, what is the difference between smart administration and management?
Yes. Well, management is managing, managing an organization, managing a team, managing an infrastructure. It has a little bit of a more scope and flexibility in the activity, while administration is more a functional and technical thing applied to infrastructures, systems that have a very precise boundary. So I'm the administrator of this pipeline. I'm the administrator of this infrastructure. I'm the administrator of this telecom tower. That is a very technical role. And but those entities need maintenance, regular maintenance, troubleshooting. So it needs technicians to apply. Management is people who manage resources, money, infrastructure, have a little bit higher level, and the scope of life is a little bit more complex. So you manage things rather than administering things. It would be a big problem if you, instead of managing an organization, you administer it, and that is administering it without looking forward or without trying to be innovative. Administration is basically based on a set of standards and operating rules that you go and administer something. I hope I answered.
Thank you, Dr. Bijan. Thank you very much. There's another question by Mohammed saying, thank you for this presentation. I have a question for Dr. Fay. How can we identify and understand potential links in the public practice and action between sustainability and smart projects?
If I understand this question correctly, which means the links between different organizations in the public sector that are dealing with the built environment, how can we understand the linkage between their projects? If I understand that was the question. This is a very complex business, and it's really difficult for the government, and maybe Hassan they would know about this. يعني حتى بس تنظيم المهن الهندسية how difficult it is, let alone يعني controlling all of the entities that have a say or a hand in the built environment in general, and also in smartness and sustainability in general. It's really not an easy thing to do. We've done a research a while back about the affordable housing projects by the Ministry of Housing in Medina Shamaliyah والمدينة الجنوبية وشرق الحد. And we've looked at how the process of developing those 3 newly developed also residential areas in Bahrain have been developed, and what hindered the implementation of ideas of sustainability and smartness into those very latest urban developments. And we've noticed that actually one of the main constraints is really the lack of coordination between different entities, which lengthens the process, and people just give up the idea of implementing sustainable and smart solutions because they just want to end up delivering those houses to their beneficiaries. So I think we are doing a lot in that sense. We've tried creating the CPO, the Central Planning Organization, and put everyone together on one table and try to discuss things, but it is not really an easy thing to do. I hope I've answered the question, if I got it correctly.
Thank you, Doctora. Thank you. We are almost 1 hour, I think. We can conclude if there is no more questions. First of all, thank you very much for the nice comments in the chat box. Thank you, Dr. Bijan. Thank you, Dr. Rafay. Thank you, everybody. There is no more questions, so inshallah, we'll see you in the next events, inshallah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hosting, Hassan. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sayyid Hassan, for conducting this event. Thank you. Bye-bye.